Cuba and the Bahamas, it's still better than the Bahamas, what we say. Will that continue to be once Cuba opens? We'll ask the Prime Minister his thoughts after these words. Welcome back. I'm Steve McKinney. Of course, tonight we're in an interview with the nation's chief executive, Prime Minister Christie. We're talking about the state of affairs. A lot of things we've spoken of so far. Tonight, we want to talk some more. And one of those things that we want to talk about certainly is the fact that Cuba may be opening very soon. A lot of Bahamians have some fears about it. I know that there are many who don't have any fear about it because they know what the plans are. But we want to find out from Prime Minister Christie tonight, should there be fears, or should we be concerned about the fact that the embargo would be lifted after about 50 years on Cuba, and then of course we will be in a position where they are competing with us. I just was reading some stats the other day, and I see where they've gone now over the 6 million visitor threshold. Sorry, by 6% they've grown, so they've now far surpassed the 3 million that they had in 2013. It's now somewhere on the way to 4 or 5 million people in Cuba. And now with it opening up with all its mystic and all those things, are we concerned in the Bahamas about them opening, and what would it mean for us?
Well, I think from a competitive point of view, the Bahamas should be concerned with the entire region, because the smaller islands chip away at you as well. And they've looked and they've seen how effective the model of tourism has been for the Bahamas, where the son of a taxi driver could not only become prime minister, but he can get an education, right? And his brothers and sisters similarly. And so that's been the model of the Bahamas, the children of straw vendors, the children of waiters and waitresses. And so therefore we have to maintain our preeminent position in the region. As you said, Cuba will be seen to be an exotic destination, a foreign language destination right offshore United States of America. And because it has been closed for so long, it's going to have its special features and attractions.
Aura. People want to go there.
Just happening? To let you know, reading the Canadian government anticipates that its exports to Cuba will now go down as a result of America taking the position it's taken. So all countries recognize, so to speak, the advantages that will flow to Cuba. I was in Cuba 3 weeks ago, and we had an hour-and-a-half meeting with the President Raul Castro. And in that meeting, we discussed what I would consider to be a new and beneficial relationship between the Bahamas and Cuba. Firstly, that we have transportation between the two countries. Bahamas Air goes there, Havana Air comes to the Bahamas. And so the first point we spoke about was, how do we make multi-destination tourism successful? And so for me, it was a wonderful meeting. It was really expansive. In the meetings with Caribbean leaders, I articulated the position as the incoming leader of CARICOM, now beginning this month, that we have not taken sufficient advantage of our cultural strength in the region, and that in this coming year, not only in the Bahamas will we emphasize that, to show the extent to which culture, sports can be a segment of the economy. You know, and I use Jamaica as an illustration, that Jamaica exports soccer players, track and field persons, they bring in income into the country, music producers, music stars. We're going to create that same kind of opportunity for Bahamians in a real big way here in the Bahamas. And so Cuba, for me, really lends itself to an advantage to the Bahamas, a net advantage to the Bahamas, because of our proximity and because we offer something different. See, no matter where you go in Cuba, you're not going to see, I don't care where you go, you're not going to see the waters that we have in the Bahamas. You're not going to see the kind of peace and serenity that you have in the Bahamas. You know, we're not going to be a country of revolutions. There's no history of that in the Bahamas. You know, you have modern communications here. And you know that whereas you will be tempted to go to Cuba for a holiday, and that's fine, in the Bahamas you'd also want to live here. And so there is no secret to the potential of our country. The final point I'd want to make in this is that the reason why we must drive the foreign investment proposals that we have to a conclusion, particularly as we select them for different islands and therefore we can create a new economy in different islands, is that once you put 5 million, 20 million, or 100 million in the ground, you cannot lift it and carry it with you. And I told a story this morning that when I went in to live for the first time in where I'm now living in Westwood Villas, the conveyance said blacks weren't allowed to buy there.
Yeah.
Okay? But yet now, that's where we live. And so time, entrepreneurial opportunities, Bahamians one day will be major investors in all of these areas. And Bahamians one day will be investors in places like Cuba. And so we have to therefore see, as we think big in our country, that Cuba is just another example of a regional power who will be there, and that the Bahamas has special offering, most of all its people. And that as long as we as the people believe and love our country in the way that I've spoken about earlier, that people who come in will share that joy and excitement in our country.
It's a unique place.
Yeah, it's a unique place. Yeah,
Absolutely.
no question about it.
No question.
And I think, you know, the other point is, I said this morning in talking to a group of tourism employees gathered, that we have to take advantage of our history. You know, Christopher Columbus, the first encounter between the old and new world was in San Salvador. We have not magnified that, right? The best recorded information of a slave plantation is the Facuson plantation in San Salvador. We ought to rebuild it. Okay? The story that was a catalyst for the abolition of slavery was poor black Kate, a Crooked Island girl at 15, 16, who was put in the stockade and killed. And the first whites who were prosecuted for cruelty against slaves was Henry and Mary Moss, the owners of the plantation in Crooked Island. And they were given 3 months in jail. And it caused a furor in the colony in those days. But it led the abolitionists in London to use it as a weapon in the fight for the abolition of slavery. We got to use things like that.
We've got to bring the history alive.
Yes, and
the
as a part
alive.
of cultural heritage tourism. And so look, I think we're onto something special. And once we are able to get this excitement that is there, right, and rip the surface off and let people see it and feel it, we're in business. And I really feel good about the Bahamas. I know what the menace is out there on crime, and therefore we're going to just keep on going at it. But we have such a wonderful opportunity to hire all the Bahamians that need work. And that's what I'm aiming at now, that in the next 2 years, everyone will see for themselves what we, my government, has done to bring that day nearer, where people who want to work could go to Maguana and find work, could go to Acklands and find work, could go to Bimini and Grand Bahama and find work, because it will be there for them.
Prime Minister, we've mentioned a lot of things tonight, but we didn't talk much about the country's natural resources. In recent times, everybody's been talking about, we have oil. They've been talking about our aragonite, they've been talking about our sand and all the other things that can be extracted from our grounds to make big monies on the world market. What is the government saying? What's the government's position on these many matters of great interest in the Bahamian public as it relates to aragonite, mining, as it relates to drilling for oil, those kinds of things? The government has not spoken a whole lot about it. From an environmental point of view, yes, we have. The government has done that. But from a point of view where people could be empowered economically, what say Prime Minister Christie along the lines of resting assured to the Bahamian public that your government is on top of these matters, such as the natural resources of this country, that could be the future for the country here in the Bahamas?
Well, you know, happily, I anticipated that this debate one day will come about. And I asked the Bahamas Agricultural and Industrial Corporation to engage in studies to determine the sustainability, for example, of sand and aragonite.
Yes.
Traditionally, governments of the Bahamas have always decided not to populate the sand of other countries, the beaches in Florida with Bahamian sand, because we were offering that to people to come into the Bahamas. And if we go and put our sand on the beaches in Florida,
It'll be
then
there.
it'll be there and not here. There. So
Absolutely.
that has always been. But aragonite has an industrial use. Before it used to be an ocean key used to export, therefore making glass and other such things. I'm advised, and we're engaged in research, that a number of Bahamian private companies have now been in intensive discussions with business persons in the United States of America about the use of aragonite. We have done studies with the University of Miami and the University of Havana, right, on sand and its sustainability. You know, we found that the tons, millions of tons swept into the tongue of the ocean and goes down and whatnot. Almost if you put a catchment there, you could have it to export forever and forever. And that it is renewable. It is a
Yes,
renewable
naturally it
resource.
does.
So that, all right? We looked at salt and we looked at, you know, I don't want to deny the contribution that Morton Salt has made to Inagua. It is a one company island, really. But at the same time, we have not come anywhere near getting any kind of income or revenue from that. Even if we have, we recognize the contribution they're making. Places like Ragged Island and Long Island, other islands have salt. And we have to, right now, we have certain homemade collections of salt that you can use. But I'll tell you this, when I had my medical challenge and I went to Johns Hopkins, they told me that for the kind of problems I was having with sinuses and so forth.
Salt,
That I must use salted
Salt,
water.
yeah.
Okay? And I said, good Lord, that's what we have here in the
abundance of
Bahamas.
it.
And so I think what we discovered in government this time is that we have to really make a determined effort to understand the value of the resources we have. Like, for example, in Freeport, you had the company down there mining rock. All right, and we were looking at the value to the country and not seeing any value to it. We met an application in place for them to mine in Maguana. We're giving consideration in my ministry to go to the government of the Bahamas to say, yes, we would give permission on the condition that you build a harbor and that you have a cruise ship company like Honourable that will commit itself, once the harbor is built, to bringing a cruise ship there, and that it will therefore serve to have a new place for the mail boat, a new place for yachts, and it will have a cruise ship. So therefore and the royalties will be paid for it. And so we do understand that the natural resources, what we do not know is all of the natural resources that are available to us. And one final example. We found out that the country is exporting something called the sea whip. I can't recall the scientific name for it, but this is an organism that exists in our waters where the currents impact each other. And apparently it exists and it can be used for medicinal purposes. And so we were looking at the revenue. Earl DeVoe indicated to me he thought that there was a fund that they left in place where the royalties were going and so forth. And so when I looked at our new relationship with the University of Miami and the professors who have written books about the Bahamas, I concluded that we have done very badly for ourselves in this country, where people outside know the value of the country, know the value of the natural resources we have, and we in the Bahamas do not know. And I can tell you this, that was one reason why I am compelled to say that the University of Bahamas must come about by 2016, because universities and the nature of research and empowerment that it gives a country will enable us to be able to chronicle and really add to all that we know about our country and to be able to make value out of it. My final point on oil, it may or may not be there. The fact of the matter is we've just finished very, very extensive consultancies with the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation, an English Commonwealth organization, on putting legislation together. Because we are told by people in the oil business that there's a fortune out there, a huge catchment out there between Andros and Cuba. Maybe, maybe not. The one thing that I would say is that we're not going to going to base our economy on that. If it happens, then God has smiled on the Bahamas. But in the meantime, right, we know we have to work with what we know that exists. And I'm saying, right in Andros alone, Pinling made a speech in 1982, I believe it was, 1981, where he said, Freeport will be the industrial capital, New Providence the financial capital, and he said, as America becomes more urban, the lands of agriculture will now go into development. He said, Andros will loom larger. The pine trees of Andros will produce turpentine. We're about to agree to an investment in that area to sap turpentine from the trees, right? He says that the muck of the west coast of Andros will have some kind of value for women and facial packs. And he says the soil of Andros, the 138,000 acres that exist down there, will be used, produce produce not only for the Bahamas, but for export. We are on the way to actualizing Pinling's dream. And it's going to happen in this term. And Bahamians are going to be amazed to see what we're going to do down there.
Well, Mr. Christie, the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Pinling always said, independence in and of itself is fantastic, it's good. But independence without economic independence is no independence at all. And so I suppose you are now that Prime Minister who must usher in the economic independence.
Well,
and it sounds like you're on your way with the many things that you're talking about.
Sometimes it's difficult when you know that there are Bahamians with brilliant ideas but no capital. And we spoke about banks and the order of banks. And we spoke about the challenge of the Bank of the Bahamas. And you're going to find, as you find more and more about the Bank of the Bahamas made some loans to Bahamians on the promise that they would be successful. And they haven't been. Now, we're not going to give up on those Bahamians. We've taken the money out, we've taken the debt out, and put it into resolve. And we're going to work with them towards being able to get them to have successful businesses to pay us back. But we know that the challenge for development is that as we develop these islands with direct foreign investment, that how are we going to get Bahamians to create the economic linkages and to benefit from it? And I once got a note from a very famous political supporter of ours in Exuma, when he said, Prime Minister, he wrote me, we do not have the entrepreneurial instincts and history down there, so you're going to have to help us in Exuma. And I was surprised. And I remember once on a platform where Frank, I shouldn't even call Frank's name, but a cleaning company was down there, right? Right, Frank Hanna. Yeah. And he's sitting in the audience, and I says, my God, are you telling me that y'all could not even find somebody to clean these buildings and hotels down there? About 2 months later, a young man wrote me and said he and his wife listened to me, and they formed a company, and they have 20 employees. And the rest is history. They still exist, and they have a dynamic involvement in the economy down there. That's what has to happen wherever we have these development. There are opportunities for Bahamians. They must believe that there are opportunities for them, and the government has to find a way, and even if we introduce innovations in financing, find a way to facilitate their being able to take advantage of the opportunities that we are creating for them.
Prime Minister, of course, you've created opportunities for many people. A lot of young people are within your grouping. A lot of young ministers, state ministers are in your cabinet, a part of your government. But there's the criticism, Prime Minister, that you've not done enough with them insofar that they can do much more than they've been allowed to do. That's one. The other thing is this, and I'm going to let you speak to this, that you've had considerable turbulence from some of them because of the exuberance, perhaps, to do more. The big question here, Prime Minister, is the Christie government really looking at the involvement with the young and the young at heart within his government, within his cabinet, to really be out front on a number of issues in its future development? Hold that thought now. I'm going to run to the break. I want you to think about that because we want to talk about that.
I have an answer for you.
That and the governance and politics in our final segment.
I have an answer for you.
After we come back. This is the program tonight, a special interview with the nation's chief executive. We're talking with Prime Minister Perry Gladstone Christie on a matter of state of affairs. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back tonight in our program. We're talking with the nation's chief executive, Prime Minister Perry Gladstone Christie, in his second non-consecutive term in office. And of course, we're talking about the state of affairs. Lots of things we've covered here this evening. There are even more interesting things as we talk with the Prime Minister. One of them, your favorite, of course, governance and politics. And of course, it happens to be one of my favorites as well, Prime Minister, because that's what people talk about every day. What is Christie them doing? How are they doing what they're doing? Why are they doing what they are doing? Governance and politics. It's a strange mix sometimes when you look at it. And sometimes we can't separate what is only governance and what is just petty politics. But be that as it may, there's been a criticism, Prime Minister, that has come about the Prime Minister not fully utilizing the youngsters in his grouping. And as a result of it, some of them have gotten a little bit, I suppose, overexcited, for want of a better word, in trying to amplify who they are and what they bring to the table. Prime Minister, speak to this for me, because some people said, you see, he came back with all these young fellas talking about he is going to do this, that, and that, and we gave him a chance based upon all these young people. Now look, we don't see enough of them in the forefront of the governance. How do you address that, sir?
I'm surprised that anyone arriving at such a conclusion about not seeing enough of them in the forefront. Firstly, I went out and I recruited them. So insofar as security, personal psychological security as a politician and as a leader is concerned, I have that. And the most important point I want to make is that I saw the future of my party as being weighed in the balance leading into the 2012 elections. I wanted to have the new leadership of the party there potentially in place, and to give a diverse group of young men and women an opportunity to participate. When I formed the cabinet, I had to make a selection and a balance between the old and the new, and I thought I had the right balance. Those persons who were not selected for the cabinet were given other executive positions, like Renwood Wells, a parliamentary secretary, balance against Tony Moss, who was a former member of parliament, someone who has experience.
Understood.
He's a parliamentary secretary, right? And in case of Renwood, I remember saying to him, man, I deeply regret that you didn't make the cut. I regard you as such a bright, intelligent young man. I said, and I really wanted to, and at the first opportunity, I'm going to be able to do it. People like Arnold Forbes, for example, businessman, extraordinary story, former athlete, had a kidney given to him, a wonderful story to tell. Again, young, new. All these people came in. He became chairman of BAIC and has done a wonderful job in that capacity. So my point is that I don't know what would drive people to a conclusion that I have not empowered young people. See, they say of me, oh, Christie is laid back, Christie lazy, Christie this, Christie that, Christie is too soft, okay? So I don't know what you want. I give you the freedom to be who you are. Once you are operating within the ambit of the philosophy of the Progressive Liberal Party, the integrity that we need in governance, then you are free to express yourself, to do as you think is right for the country and for your ministry. I've empowered them to do that. I have a wonderful balance, and to those persons who are not there, people like Greg Moss, who's not in, Rollins, who's not in now, young man who just had to resign or have his position vacated by me. These are people who have been given opportunities to function, and if in fact they lost those opportunities, it was not because of me. It was really because of actions they themselves decided to take. We have a wonderful organization, and our governance is based on the realization that people will have different views, and that to an extent the organization has to accommodate those views. And let me just say this, that I happen to be leader of the PLP, a party that witnessed me running as an independent, allowed me to come back in to be the leader of that party, and therefore I bring with me the sum total of my experiences, which that people disagree, and those disagreements have to be accommodated as best we can. And so I think the PLP is being now led right now by someone whose experiences are as such that will provide the leadership that is transitional into the next phase. And I'm amused when people have talk shows talking about why am I not going and why am I not this, as if we don't live in a democracy. On one hand, We have to credit people with having the good sense to determine who should be their leader, to accord to them the right to do so in our democracy. And then you say they're wrong if they keep me there. I don't know what you want to do except to say this, that the Progressive Liberal Party intends to work hard to meet the expectation of the people who supported them, to represent properly the people who didn't support them, and to be able to go forward to the next election fully equipped and resourced to be able to win the next election and give the country continued good governance.
Prime Minister, every time you do an interview, there's that question that comes and that you anticipate, that question about staying or going. I want to put it to you this way. You've spent 40 years in politics, 40 solid years in politics.
Right.
Should we expect that you're going to extend that to 45 by 2017?
To tell you the truth, at this stage, I do not know. What I do know is that it's going to take compelling reasons for me to remain. And those reasons have to do with people, a lot of party sentiment, my colleagues who are with me in government. I will never ever contemplate doing something like extending myself unless there were compelling reasons to do so. And the organization, I can tell you, I'm having from all quarters, all over the Bahamas, people who are saying to me, you have no place to go. I know how that amounts to disappointment in the form of people who expect or who aspire to be leaders of the PLP. And I expect in a democratic country, just like Nottish decided to run, Dr. Nottish, to run against me and at a time when I least expected it, because, but he's my friend, and he's my friend for life. Right? He ran against me. We had a contest. I won the contest. The next moment I said, come, my brother, let's get back together. Let's move on. So that's the way in which we deal with issues of this kind. I told my family when we started the campaign in 2012, this was the final campaign for me. I do know that people like Charles Carter would come to me and say, man, stop from talking about you going. People see you as a lame duck. Say nothing about it. And so I just stopped talking about it.
Understood.
As I stopped talking about it, then everybody became strident. Oh, he's staying on. Oh, he's doing this. Oh, he's doing that. But something has to happen, tangibly, politically, for there to be an understanding that I'm going to remain in public life. There's lots of people. There's every reason for me to believe that the basis of it exists. But, for me, I choose to focus on the fact that I have an opportunity to be a defining prime minister in this term, that I've had 40 consecutive years in public life. By the time I go to an election, I may have reached the stage almost of Sir Lyndon Pindling, meaning that only Sir Roland Simmons is ahead of me. Now, I have to be crazy to be thinking of Sir Roland Simmons, because I'm not going to live that long, because he did 50 plus years, 50 years at least. And so for me, moving forward, I'm hoping that I'm in good health. I am able to demonstrate that I'm very energetic, that I have a tremendous grasp, I think, of the country and where it should be going, that I'm amused when people talk about they need something new, because I think the policies and the innovations I'm introducing are new to the Bahamas. And quite frankly, one of them will be a national plan. And let me get a national plan next year. Later this year.
This is the development,
right? National development plan, which will really be a 25-year plan for the country. Again, I don't want to go into the we'll be able to talk about that. But we came into power, and people still marvel at the fact that my government made a decision to borrow $238 million for the Defense Force. Again, that's going to be a new paradigm in coverage in our country as a maritime nation. But that kind of money, and then to be able to center the Defense Force at Coral Harbor forever and forever, therefore putting the preparation in place. To be able to go to Ragged Island and build a base there, meaning that around that base will grow an economy. And when you go to Ragged Island, you see its beauty, then you know that something's going to happen. And particularly now with Cuba coming into being, places like Key Sal and those will will grow in their prominence as Bahamian territories, and go into Anagua, where there's 100 species of birds, where you look at the Galapagos Islands, and you see all these Americans going there to watch birds. We have it right there in Anagua. So I think we have this exciting potential, right, based on the fact that my government really is not going to be preoccupied with leadership and succession to the extent that the people out there in the talk shows are. We are focused on good governance, we're focused on the future, and we have decided, just like in gaming, that we are going to make the big decisions for this country, decisions that other governments refuse to make, neglected to make. We're going to make those decisions. We're going to place the Bahamas on the right path, and Bahamians in time will see that this was good for the country and my government served the best interest of all Bahamians. That I expect. And just as we approach now this year, the government has to make a decision on whether real property tax and business license applies to people in Freeport. These are major decisions that my government must make. And we're going to make those decisions, and we're going to do so in a very collaborative way in terms of moving forward. And so I think the people of the Bahamas can really expect, right, good things from us moving forward, because my government, the leadership of the government, has a grasp of our country. We see the future before us. We know what that should look like, and we are aiming towards finessing our country into that. So Bahamians who are abroad, instead of staying abroad, can see opportunities and coming back to the Bahamas.
That I appreciate. Prime Minister, when I look at where we're going, we can't go far unless we've got a good energy plan. I know that there's been considerable talk about BEC, BTC. Of course, you've made leaps and bounds on the BEC issue. And then, of course, we look at the other one, Bahamas Air. Can you explain or share with us substantively the whole idea of BEC as a place that we can now look forward to with renewable energies, with a different modus operandi, so that we can cut down on these extra mortgages? That's what people call them now when they pay their light bills, and that's because of the fuel cost, the surcharge of the fuel cost. What's the energy plan? What's going to happen with BEC substantially? Are we going to take BEC and put it into a partnership with someone else? People don't know enough. In fact, they've said that your government has been secretive about BEC. Well, perhaps you can share it with me.
We have not been secretive. When we came to power, we found that the most intimidating really experience for Bahamians was the cost of energy. We found that truly applied to investors, that we were outpricing ourselves in the investment area because the energy costs were just too high. So we decided we had to do something about it. And we knew in doing something about it, we had a Mera in Freeport, a large Canadian company down there running a separate enterprise. And what's interesting about that is the Minister of Tourism just told the Cabinet that last week they introduced a reduced amount of money that you pay for rates, per kilowatt hour. They gave a lower rate. Now, we set off with a request for proposal to develop whatever came out of that request for proposal, whether it's private generation, private distribution. We just left it open, but we knew we wanted to be able to reduce costs. We knew that BEC had developed a debt of $460 million, and that was an albatross around the neck of BEC. And so we set about to see if we could find a private sector partner who can effect cost savings for us, a reduced per kilowatt hour charge, and also absorb the legacy debt. We've reached a point now where recommendations have been made to the government, and the government has authorized me to review the recommendations as to who should be given a management position, and at the same time use the management position to build a new plant, to introduce levels of efficiency, to absorb the legacy debt, okay? Even if it's, as we are now considering this $460 million debt on a rate reduction bond that we've been negotiating with Citibank and other financing entities. We have a formula. And so we're at the stage now where the government is very, very close to producing, in accordance with our plan and our promise, right, a lower rate for electricity, a new plan moving forward that will embrace the management of BEC, that will do so in a way that will give the management of BEC a dignified existence there, that will take, say, the new programs of alternative energy into the islands, that would have given consideration to solar, wind, generated electricity, all of the innovations that are necessary to bring about a new paradigm for electricity, both in terms of generation and distribution. And so I expect, therefore, to have a position before the end of this month, allowing for the fact that I'm going to China on Monday evening and spending at least a week there. I expect to have in place, most certainly by the end of January, the plan going forward, and to be able to speak to the Bahamian people specifically about how their lives will be so much better.
And that's on electricity. That's
Right.
on the whole idea of energy and all that.
Right.
Prime Minister, speak to me about Bahamas Air. I mean, successive governments have had difficulty
Bahamas
in
Air,
looking at this
when we
entity.
started off, the government recognized that Bahamas Air had two really functions. One internationally, and the next one to connect domestically the entire country. And that whatever we did, we had to guarantee to the Bahamian people the connectivity. What has happened is that over these years, the cumulative amount of money that has been spent by way of subsidies is now over $500 million, with no real tangible success other than flying to Florida, Fort Lauderdale, and Orlando. A few years ago, we had a much greater impact in flying around and producing tourists for the Bahamas. And so we know now that, especially when we've just had this industrial dispute, right, there seems to be a disconnect between the central government's view, right, of the subsidies it's giving and what pilots and people of Bahamas here think they should get, because we cannot continue in the way we're going, especially when we look at the salaries other pilots are making in the region. And so we have set out with all of the areas, whether it's BEC, now Water and Sewage, and Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas, to look for innovations, to investigate whether strategic partnerships could assist us. We are in discussions with respect to Bahamas Air with people who say they have an interest in the airline. We do know that that will sort of cause a break between how we do business and how we'll have to do business in that regard. It may well be manifesting in the best interest of the country. These are decisions we have to make, but we need to find a strategic partner that will be able to take Bahamas Air, make it into truly an international carrier, impacting the tourism product, because we spend an enormous amount of money doing that. And then Bahamas Air domestic could ply in competition with Sky and Western and those.
Pineapple and the rest.
And just let me say that it was my government in our first term that decided to give Bahamas Air notice that we were going to break the monopoly and we were going to privatize the skies by allowing these private companies to come about. We know that that is the case. And during the recent industrial dispute and stoppage of work, Sky, Bahamas, and Western and Pineapple picked up the slack, and people were serviced, and they were serviced properly, therefore giving us a clear indication that we are headed in the right direction in terms of having private carriers provide the service for the Bahamas.
Prime Minister, I wonder though, as you look at, you're now at the front of a brand new year. There's many great prospects out there. You've talked about any number of initiatives that the government is doing and about to capitalize on that will cause for job creation, that will cause for reconsideration of the mortgage crisis that we have, that would cause for a number of things. I want to ask you this question. Prior to coming to the governance this time around, it was your considered view, based upon the steps that were placed down in the plan of the governing party, that you would look at land reform in a big way, to the point where even generation property may be something that can be used as collateral to banks for persons who have rights to generation property. I've not heard much about that in recent times, but there are many people in the public who would like to know, where is the government headed on this generation property bit as it relates to if they can still get it collateralized?
Well, we have to do something about it. In my first term, we began a process that should have led to that happening. It's a significant matter in terms of that. We have places like Moores Island where people are really challenged in terms of ownership of their properties, entire communities. And so I can say that it is one of those matters that we have to address, and one that is in the process of being addressed. We know, for example, that in this term we must come up with a land use policy. We pass new subdivision laws, but we have to be able to address the issue of generation property, of commonage, as the case might be, because it is there, mind you, to protect the generations of people unborn, giving them a right to access the property. And we do know we have to be careful with how we allow that to be squandered, because, you know, places like Harbour Island and the commonage like that, it can be a very attractive source for people selling land.
Prime Minister, it has been quite a challenge in the first half of your administration this time around, since you came to office in the second time, for the second non-consecutive time of governance. I want to ask you, though, your best moments, if you will. There must have been some things that you said, well, boy, we should have done that differently. But there may have been some best moments that we have overlooked from your perspective that you thought were best moments thus far in your administration. Do you have some?
Well, I think the greatest disappointment I had in my first term was the fact that we passed national health insurance legislation, but we did not bring it into effect, that we allowed the stakeholders to discourage us moving forward, and they were very effective in doing so. We are going to introduce national health insurance in January of 2016. We know that the cost of the first phase that they call the vital stage will be around $330 million. We know that when it's built out, we're talking about $680 or so million. It's not a question for us as to whether or not we could afford it, right? We know that, you know, I used to say, and I said in a meeting that shocked people, if you're poor and you're black and you have a particular disease, you die. And when a prime minister is able to say it, whoever disagrees with it, when he's able to say that and to say it and mean it, then you should know how serious he is about this. We are not going to compromise with respect to this matter. It's a matter that is very, very important to this country and the health of this country. It's going to require us to do a lot of work. So the good moment for me was when we said we're going to do it, and we brought a company in to do the fact finding for us, to reassess where we were, and they said, yes, this can work, yes, it will go ahead. We've had all sorts of consultancies come in it, but I feel so strongly that when we look back at our term in government, that if we are able to put in place universal health care that will be maximum protection for Bahamians, right, who just don't have it now, all right, and that it's going to cause us to reconfigure, recalibrate the physical premises in Grand Bahama, build a new hospital in Grand Bahama, change around the Princess Margaret Hospital to conform with the critical care block. We know that these things are going to happen. We're planning it, we're engaged in it, and I'm really on the firing line on this happening. So when you ask me what's my good moment, you know, I'm saying, for example, that one day I was traveling to the Bahamas, and I said to Obi Wilscombe, I said, Obi, you know, I'm a junkanoo, but I can't find a way how junkanoos could make money out of junkanoo. So therefore I want a junkanoo carnival. And I said, that is going to enable us to cause people like Gus Cooper and Vola Francis to sell costumes and earn a living. Other countries have been able to have these people become millionaires because of their artistic genius. We haven't been able to do that. And more we're being challenged in terms of sponsorship of these large groups. So let's do this. Let's do this as a cultural thing, but it's going to be economic. It's being driven by economics, and we're going to be selling costumes online. And I got personally involved in this, and I know there are people who don't like new things, and people who say you don't copy Trinidad, and so forth and so on. There are 300 carnivals in the world. We're not going to compromise on Junkanoo. We're going to use Carnival to promote it. We see this as a major segment moving forward. And let me tell you something. The geniuses of the designers will bring now new women involved in this activity where they are designing. They're going to be people who make the jump from the Carnival costumes to clothes and clothing lines and so forth. So we know we are on to something. That again is another major matter. And I'm hoping that in this year, we've put intense efforts into trying to capture what we want to do in being able to lift up the culture of our country and get economic returns for our artisans. And so we think we are very close to it. We've consulted some of the biggest in the world. We've had them here in the Bahamas. We've met with them. And so we feel that when we look at our economy, and we look at the amount of money that is spent, this multi-billion-dollar economy, we feel that there are opportunities for Bahamians on the creative side, on the geniuses that exist, whether it's in music, whether it's in theater, whether it's in producing things. We feel that we must give our Bahamians a better opportunity to maximize on what we have and establishing the linkages in this. And we just cannot rationalize continuing to fail in that regard. So my brother, what I see for me going forward is that I must be resolute in my commitment to get these things done. The time is of the essence. I'm headed for the 3rd anniversary in governance, that I'm not going to be distracted by anybody, whether they're young people in my organization or old people in my organization. The people have empowered us to govern. And when we look back at this period in our governance from 2012 to 2017, you're going to find that no government has matched us in legislative agenda and being able to execute new laws, new transformative laws, whether it's in financial services and creating new products in Latin America to bring them in, whether it's taking Latin tourism to Russia, to China. We have been transformative in our approach to legislation, and so there's no doubt when you look back at it, you can say, good God, that Christie government between 2012 and 2017 was a defining, transformative government. My own feeling is in terms of the policies and bringing our culture and integrating it into the economy, bringing religion and integrating it into the economy, bringing health and introducing the economy. When we came in, the F&M had started with stem cells. Mistakenly, they were licensing people without legislation. We said we do not want to embarrass our country. So we actually brought into being innovative legislation, stem cell legislation. And we brought in the University of Miami and other universities to help us administer it, to bring this jurisdiction to a level of respectability. So again, medical and health tourism becomes not just something we're going behind, but we're going behind with legitimacy. So, I feel good about what we're doing. And, when we talk about the older persons in my government have a lot of experience and is now benefiting the younger persons in the government. And we will always have the experiences of the Ryan Pindus, people who come in, people who see other opportunities, people who go. But that strengthens our hand, it strengthens our country. And I've always said, the PLP operates an open door. It swings in and it swings out. And one thing that you can find in my governance, right, that we're not going to stand in the way of people who want to come in or people who want to go out. We're just going to keep on moving forward in the best interest of this country.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate it. It's good, and we hope that we can sit and talk again.
It's been a pleasure. And just let me say this. You are in broadcasting. Just as you've heard me speak of these island developments, I want you to go down there and see them as they occur and speak to it as they happen. That's what I would like to do. I'm inviting you and other people to do that because I am so confident that in the coming weeks and months, as early as weeks, in the coming weeks and months, you're going to see this transformative enveloping the Bahamas, transformation enveloping the Bahamas. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it, Prime Minister, and we hope to talk again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's our conclusion tonight of our sit-down discussion with the nation's Chief Executive, Prime Minister Perry Gladstone Christie, in this edition of A State of Affair. And of course, we hope that you've enjoyed it. We hope that you've been inspired by a lot of it, and certainly it's on the record. So we're holding the Prime Minister and his government accountable for all that is supposed to take place. I'm Steve McKinney. Thanks for looking in. Good night.